extension, so we're doing these gross and not the individual muscles, so you're gonna stabilize at the forearm. I'm gonna ask her to bring her hand up to my hand, and I'm gonna ask her to hold that right there, and then I'm gonna put pressure, and I would normally do it like this, but so you can see, I'm gonna push down, right? And if she took moderate resistance, she would get 4. Good. So say that I asked her to bring her hand up to my hand and she couldn't, then what do we do? Gravity decrease, which is forearm neutral. So we'll start here, and then I usually give people a target too. I want you to reach your hand, your back to my hand, and she can. So she gets a grade of 2. Good. And a great place to palpate for wrist extension is right here on the back of the wrist. You can feel that little pulley system right over here, over the radius. So if you need to palpate, if she doesn't do an obvious motion. Okay, so then wrist flexion is the exact opposite. We'll have the forearm supinated. I'm gonna provide my support on the forearm again. I'm gonna ask her to bring her hand up to my hand, and she can. So I'll ask her to hold that there, and I'm gonna provide pressure in the palm of her hand, and I'm gonna push her down here. And she took no resistance, so she would get a 3. Good. Say I asked her to bring her hand up to my hand and she can't. Again, we put her forearm neutral, and then I ask her to bring her hand toward my hand, and then she gets a grade of 2. Good. Any questions about that one? Okay. So the next one is testing the lumbricals pretty much, and the MP flexion and IP extension. So I'm gonna ask Darcy, can you make this position with your hand? So the fact that she can get into that position means that she's at least a 3. She can do that position. And now what I'm gonna ask her is, I'm gonna support her at the forearm, and I'm gonna slip my hand in here, and I'm gonna try to extend the MPs and flex the IPs at the same time. So go ahead and try to just hold that, Darce. And she's really strong. So she gets 5 because she didn't move, and I really should be supporting her at the wrist too, here the wrist, because I'm testing the fingers. So the wrist and the forearm should have the support. And again, and then if you'll let me move you a little bit, Darce, I'm trying to push her this way and bend here. Okay. MP extension, I'm gonna have you just bring your arm down like this, so she's pronated. I'm going to ask her, I'm gonna support at the wrist here and stabilize the wrist. I'm gonna ask her to bring her fingers back like this if she can, up. And again, those are your long finger extensors that we're testing here. And your intrinsics are the one that bring the fingers all the way into extension. So I just need those, her knuckles up. Is one way to say it. I'm gonna ask her to hold that right there. I'm gonna provide resistance at the proximal phalanx on the dorsal side. Try to hold that there. Hold that there. Hold. And hold. And she took.
I varied.
She did. So she took full resistance, the first 2. She get a 5. And then she took no resistance here.
3.
So she get 3 for those last 2. And again, with fingers, we don't usually worry so much about gravity decreased. You certainly could try it if you wanted to in a gravity decreased, but I don't worry about that, right? Okay. Now we're gonna go to PIP flexion, which what muscle does that? Yep, which is your superficialis. Yep, so FDS is your flexor digitorum superficialis. So that's the one that's going to flex the PIP, so, or the closer. So now what I wanna do is to have her forearm supinated. I'm going to provide stabilization at that proximal phalanx. I'm gonna ask her to bring her fingers toward her palm, and then I'm going to provide the resistance at the middle phalanx. So hold there. Okay, can you bring this one up? I'm gonna hold there. Bring these up, hold there, she's got nothing.
I have nothing there anyway.
And hold there. So again, her 4th and 5th digits, again, took no resistance, and her 1st and
And they're
second
kind of
did.
tethered together so they don't move by themselves anyway.
So that's, again, she got the same scores as she did with extension. So for DIP flexion, where are we gonna provide the stabilization now for the DIPs? Right, the middle phalanx now. So I am going to hold that down. You can do them individually if you want. I'm gonna ask you to bring your finger up towards your palm as much as you can right there. Good, and hold that there and provide resistance on that distal phalanx and relax. She gets full resistance. Bring that up and hold that there. And she took no resistance. So 3. Bring that up and hold that there. Ooh, she took moderate resistance there. Bring your pinky up and hold that there. And I give you a 3+ on that. Does that make sense? All of those? Okay. So finger abduction, or remember this is your dorsal interossei, or what, bring your fingers apart and you really can feel that first dorsal interossei. Usually if you start adducted and then you ask the patient to fan their fingers out, you should be able to feel that first dorsal interossei contract. Do you feel that on yourselves? Okay, so we're gonna start with her fingers in, again, she's pronated here. I'm gonna stabilize at the wrist. How people cheat with this often is they'll bring up their hand to try to use their flexors so she needs to stay flat for this. And I'm gonna ask her to spread her fingers out, and she does, she lifted, and that's okay. And I'll have you hold that there, and I'm gonna provide resistance at the proximal phalanx again, and I'm moving toward the middle finger, so try to hold that there. She took no resistance, but she has full range of motion. Try to hold that there. She takes no resistance, but took full range of motion. So she's for the 3. So very consistent strength there in those last 2 fingers. And now hold that there. And she takes full resistance.
5.
So she's a 5, and then middle finger, try to hold that, and then try to hold that there. And she takes full resistance there, wasn't able to move. So again, very consistent. Now for the finger adduction, I'm gonna put her palm up, because I think this is, and we're gonna start with the fingers spread, and then I'm gonna ask her to move them in. So we're gonna start, there's gonna be our start position, and can you bring your fingers all together? Good. Now I'm gonna ask her to hold that there, and I'm gonna pull on her proximal phalanx to see if she can hold that. Go ahead and hold that there. Good. So we're going to do the index, pinky out, and the 4th finger out, all the way from the middle finger. The middle finger just stays. Okay. Now we get to the thumbs. It's fine. So thumb extension is which way again? This way. Okay, so this is thumb extension. So, yep, so we have extensor pollicis brevis. So our resistance is gonna be at the proximal phalanx. So first I'm gonna ask her, I didn't realize once, have you bring your thumb up to my finger, and she can. I'm gonna ask you to hold that right there. She takes moderate resistance. So she's a 4, okay. Thumb IP extension, it's essentially the same thing, except for we're doing extensor pollicis longus. Remember, it's gonna go is longer, so it's gonna go all the way to the end. So I'm going to stabilize that proximal phalanx. And now I'm gonna ask her, can you bring your thumb up to my finger? Good. Now hold that there, and I'm going to try to bend that past the IP joint. Okay? Thumb flexion, so that's going across the palm, right? So we
Switch
now have
hands
her,
maybe, so they can see it.
yeah, so I would normally have her supinated in this kind of position, but so you guys can see, we'll be in a kind of a turned position. I'm gonna ask her to bring her thumb over to my finger, and she does. And we're doing brevis first, so I'm going to provide the resistance at that proximal phalanx. I want you to hold that right there, and let me do it a little bit, Darcy, she's very strong. I'm trying to push her this way. She was a 5, but just so you could see, you're pushing into extension. And then for the IP flexion, or the flexor pollicis longus, we're going to again support the proximal phalanx. Can you bend your thumb toward my finger? Good, now hold that there, and I'm trying to push her out this way. Make sense?
So the longuses go to the end joint for the thumb.
Debbie, could you do IP capturing?
Yes, so from here, just stabilize at that proximal phalanx. So all she can bend is this. And I'm gonna ask you, bring your thumb down to my finger and hold that there.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Now for abduction, palmar abduction, we're moving away from the palm. So I'm gonna supinate her and ask her to bring her thumb up to my finger. And I'm gonna provide resistance at that proximal phalanx and try to push her down to her palm. Okay? Now for adduction, you can either be ready for it and I bring your thumb down to my finger, and now I want you to hold that there, and I'm trying to push her up. The other option you can do is, okay, can you bring your thumb down to your palm, and then try to pull on that proximal phalanx. The big things here are that you're providing the resistance at the proximal phalanx and not the distal phalanx, because if I ask her to bring her thumb up to here, and I really want you to try to hold it, Darcy, I'm putting a lot of pressure at that joint, and I have a large lever to, so the big thing with these is to know where your resistance should be at the proximal phalanx for both, for the abduction and when you're doing the brevises for flexion and extension. It's only at the longest, and if you're at the longest, you should be supporting that more proximal phalanx. Does that make sense? And then the opposition. So we'll have her supinated, and can you bring your pinky and thumb together? And then I'm gonna provide the resistance here on the metacarpal ends of the metacarpal, and I want you to hold that there, and I'm trying to flatten her hand out. So again, with this one, you're watching that she actually is opposing, because you can cheat and get to your pinky different ways, but say, I want you to bring it around here, and essentially she's gotten all the way there, and I want you to hold that